Okay, so it's been known for some time that Respawn Entertainment is producing a last generation version of Star Wars Jedi Survivor. And this is, I'd say, definitely a game that was architected for the current generation of consoles. And yet, last gen is happening. We've now got a release date somewhere in September, I think. And we've got some screenshots. And we have a promise, seemingly, from certainly within a Eurogamer news story here, that the PC version of Jedi Survivor, which we've long had issues with, it's almost like our sort of arch nemesis at this point, it's receiving a performance upgrade. Oliver, I'm going to come to you first on this one. What do you make of this? There's actual media we can look at, right? And come to some conclusions about what they're doing.
Yeah, so initially my thought was, without even looking at the screenshots, this could be an issue. Classic, not looking at the information. But it could be a situation like Callisto, where basically you've built a game intended for machines with 16 gigs of RAM, a fast CPU, a fast GPU. You're going to have a lot of trouble with that artwork in particular fitting into a system with only 8 gigs of RAM, because you have all this texture variety, and the kind of calibration of the variety and the texture resolution has been set to a certain standard. And obviously with a machine with much less RAM, that standard is going to be compromised. We see it all the time with switch ports, right? You're dealing with half the RAM. As the more powerful systems, you end up with a lot of trouble for your art assets, and things just look really messy. And in this case, you'd have trouble because you don't have an SSD, you don't have fast CPUs, etc., lots of problems. And Jedi Survivor has its own particular issues with traversal stutter that I'm sure Alex will talk about, and very many technical problems. So that was my kind of thinking. And then there were some screenshot comparisons that people did put together. Now, I don't know what console these Jedi Survivor shots are coming from. I believe some people were saying it might come from the Xbox One X store page, but I'm not sure if that is from the Xbox One X, so I'll just call it the last gen version here. And in these comparison shots, we see a number of things. We see way less foliage. We see pulled in draw distances, way lower rendering resolution, much lower texture resolution, simplified water. So it is pretty similar to that Callisto Protocol last gen experience, judging from these screens, except I think the lighting changes are more significant because you do see a reduction in the quality of indirect lighting, especially in that cave shot, where the current generation version is actually getting this really nice indirect bounce light everywhere, kind of scattered around. And these shots just do not have that in the slightest. So yeah, I'm not sure what these shots represent. The resolution does look a little low. You can't exactly count them, but they do look soft. So I'm hoping they represent something like the Xbox One version and not like a One X version, say, or a PS4 Pro version. But I would expect those lighting and artwork tweaks to be present probably across all the last gen platforms. If prior ports of games like this are anything to go by, that's probably what they're doing. So yeah, I have a number of concerns related to performance. Visuals do look downgraded, but that was certainly to be expected. The loss of ray tracing, which is obviously inevitable, I don't think that's that big of a deal because the game actually has a really good non-ray traced fallback in terms of the GI, and screen space reflections are mostly okay. Some issues with things like water, but mostly it's not too bad. So that's basically my findings so far from the very limited information and speculation I can throw out there. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
My thoughts, Hogwarts Legacy. Clearly a game designed for a more capable system. It's kind of been hacked up, essentially hacked up, and this is what you get. I have to say though, those screenshots that are circulating at the moment, I don't think they look too bad. I guess the issue is if that is the Xbox One X version, that's 6 teraflops of GPU compute and a lot of memory. It's got like 9 gigs of available memory, more than the Series S. So this could be our best case scenario. Who knows what the base Xbox One version is going to look like, but I can't wait to find out. Alex,
wow.
Any thoughts on this, or do you just want to talk about the PC version? Because
I'm curious about this.
Go on then.
I'm curious about this because I'd say the 60 FPS mode of Jedi Survivor shows to me that there's compromises that have to be done to maintain that level of CPU performance required to get somewhere near 60 FPS on Series X and PlayStation 5. And the game was just heavily single-threaded with problems on PC and the consoles as well there too. And translating that to ultra slow CPUs regarding single threaded performance because they're low clocked and tablet CPUs. Like, what else did they have to do here to get it running better beyond just turning down things like draw distance and the amount of maybe unique objects on screen as a result of clips to LOD? I'm curious what else there was done, because I think that opens up the opportunity for at least in the Eurogamer article, promised PC patch, that it could actually do something more than just little things. Because I think to have gotten this running on previous gen CPUs at anywhere near a real 30, they had to do some work on how things are done. A really good example of that is in the any single time you bring up the map in the game and your ship, and or when they show holograms on PC, when that happens, and it does happen on console too, whenever that happens, the performance on CPU, I think it goes down by like something like to like 1/4 of what it was before, in terms of being like CPU limited. So like that was an area where I could still consistently get the game to run at like 30 FPS on a 7800X 3D. Just because it's CPU limited when that happens. It's like 30 or 40. And that kind of a thing, you can't have that section when the rest of the game's CPU performance is like around 30 FPS, good enough for 30 FPS. You can't have those scenes running at 10 FPS or something like that on a Xbox One or One X even, for that matter. You couldn't have that. It would just not look right, and I don't think anyone would take this seriously. So I think they maybe will have done CPU-related work that is just about how the engine prepares things, and I hope that translates over to the PC version. But I also don't have much confidence in them doing anything good, because they released the game under the pretense that they shipped it early. It was so good they could ship it early. But it's like, nah, it came out as an EA game, not Electronic Arts, but as an early access game on, I think, the variety of systems it launched.
Yeah.
And that was a zinger, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. But I think in that case,
it's an EA game.
I think in that case, they, I'm happy they're doing this, but I want to see what it actually is before I get any sense of, excitement about it. Yeah.
This is the issue, Alex, is that, you charted Jedi Survivor across several patches, and each patch gave iterative improvements to overall performance, but didn't actually address the fundamental problems.
Right.
And, I think it's perfectly within your expectation level to say, actually, I'm not really expecting much from this at all. It's, been there, done that, got the t-shirt or whatever it is that Jedis wear.
Robes?
Yeah. Yes,
got my Jedi
got
robes.
the robes. Got the Jedi robes.
I'd also really worry about just certain areas like Coruscant. There are some areas of the game that are really pushing it. Other areas that are a little lighter, maybe will run a little bit better. But like you said, Alex, these are Jaguar CPUs at like 1.6, 1.75 gigahertz at the low end. So
PS4.
I'm not expecting miracles. Yeah, I'm not expecting miracles. Certainly not. It'll be interesting to see how close they do get to presumably a 30 FPS target there. But I'm also kind of just wondering, like taking a step back, wondering exactly what the market is for this game, because we're nearly 4 years into the console generation. The PS5 has sold, according to Sony's recent financials, 61 million units, I believe. And I know that there are a ton of PS4s out there. That's obvious. But from what I can see, people are mostly watching Netflix, playing Fortnite, playing Warzone. Are they really buying a lot of new games in those consoles? I really question it, especially when you look at some of the sales figures for various games that have broken down the percentage sold on different platforms. Those last-gen consoles are not selling a huge proportion of titles. And this isn't like, for instance, Sony launching a great version of God of War Ragnarok on PS4 and PS5. This is more along the lines of Callisto Protocol. So there's going to be bad word of mouth. The reviews are going to be bad. I mean, presuming that it is a problem. Certainly what we say, we'll be able to point out those issues, and maybe that will permeate into the broader gaming landscape, because people do pay attention to critical reviews and things like that. So I do wonder exactly what the utility is of launching this game over a year after it launched on the other consoles, 4 years into a console generation that is by a lot of measures, going along pretty well in terms of overall sales volume, at least of the PlayStation 5 and getting units out there. So I do wonder what the utility is of shipping this particular game. It's a huge game, but I really do wonder, especially if it's going to be a very compromised experience.
I also wonder whether these performance improvements to the PC version will roll into current gen consoles as well. I was looking at the Eurogamer news story for this because it does seem to have details that I haven't seen elsewhere. I'm just going to quote this for my own amusement and for conversational purposes. Star Wars Jedi Survivor will cost £44.99, $49.99 USD, and feature quote-unquote, a variety of optimizations aimed at maximizing the hardware capabilities of the consoles. When it launches for PS4 and Xbox One on 17th of September, pre-orders will receive the Hermit cosmetic kit, which makes it day one for me. It's dressing like a hermit myself. Anyway, inspired by Obi-Wan Kenobi, Hermit lightsaber set and combustion blaster set. This is the bit that I liked. Additionally, EA says the PC version, which Digital Foundry called the worst PC port of 2023, I think specifically the worst AAA PC port of 2023. Anyway, we'll be receiving an update, quote unquote, in the coming weeks. This promises, quote unquote, enhancements to the game's technical performance controls and more, as well as various quality of life improvements. What can I say? I've got to see this patch because I recently did some memory benchmarking, and Jedi Survivor was one of those games that I had to look into because basically any game that's a disaster on the CPU side usually benefits from memory, faster memory. And it is the case here. But when you just see the overall performance of that first level, the Coruscant level, and, it's tremendously bad. We're talking about a full do-over here to get it into to what I would consider an acceptable state. So, wow. Any final words on this, Alex? Actually, no, I'm going to go to a supporter question from Concrete Llama. On a scale of Star Wars Christmas Special to The Empire Strikes Back, how much are you looking forward to covering Jedi Survivor again? Credits to the knight who says "ni" for the scale.
Well, that's awesome. I'll be as my facial expression is very similar to I was about to call her Carrie Adboss, to Carrie Fisher's face in the Star Wars Christmas Special. If you've ever seen how she looks out of it, man. To say the least, that's probably my facial expression right now. Regarding one last thing that I do want to mention here, Concrete Llama, is that they do mention performance. They mention controls, which is curious. And quality of life. And I hope quality of life and controls talks about them changing the way the menu can be moved about in, which is another thing that I really complained about back then. And another thing is that the game, like a couple of other UE4 games, every single time it starts up, it does the shader compilation pass apparently, but it's just UI spinning. The CPU is doing nothing. And I think it takes like 20 to 30 seconds each time you start the game on PC. And I do not know what's happening there. And it's really incredible, needless friction, which I think is an oversight.
Hogwarts does it as well.
Yeah, but it's not.
But why?
Yeah, but it's obviously not doing something because it does it every single time. Does the game have that, like, no, it's not opportunistically doing something. They didn't code the most amazing shader compilation system in the world or something like that. So yeah, I'm curious if these other things are cleaned up. Also, just, I know this is not something we usually talk about, but I know from people who've played this game, they really like the gameplay and whatnot. But they do complain about just like really a lot of gameplay areas in the game having issues in terms of gameplay bugs is another thing. I'm curious if this version fixes up any of those, which people have highlighted across the web.
Yeah. Okay. On this sliding scale, Oliver, where do you sit?
In terms of excitement to cover it again? Oh boy.
Yeah.
I'd say about
go on.
9 out of 10. I got to go up there. I'm excited. I'm not as.
Is this kind of like
A New Hope?
Star Wars, please?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not a big Star Wars guy, but I certainly have been a big coverer of this game over the past year or so.
Okay.
I took a look at it originally, and I took a look at the patch which removed ray tracing in the performance mode and brought that into stable performance levels. So for sure, taking a look at this possibly on the last-gen consoles would be quite interesting. I think it will be a situation that's quite analogous to that Callisto Protocol situation, or like the Hogwarts Legacy situation, both games that I did take a look at on last-gen consoles, where they do have to strip a lot out, but I think the ultimate question is whether it's a good experience in those consoles, even despite the various compromises that might need to be made, and indeed whether that performance level is acceptable, because judging from this game's track record so far, it seems like a really tough ask, but we'll just have to see.
I'm really looking forward, A, to seeing the patch, and B, to seeing the last gen versions. If we're talking about sort of pop culture references, I don't think the Star Wars scale particularly applies. It would be up there. I'm thinking more of Dirty Harry when, did he fire 6 shots or only 5?
Yeah.
And the guy's got to know. I've got to know if they fixed Jedi Survivor or not, and I've got to know if they could actually make it run in a reasonable way on Xbox One and PlayStation 4. I mean, that's the big question. I can't wait to find out.